All right. Good evening. Welcome to our men's group. Glad to have Pastor John with me here. Pastor Ethan will be joining us shortly. He's getting everything set up with the sound. And tonight, John, we're going to start off a new topic. We finished our topic on values the other week. And so we're going to be discussing, I think, something near and dear to us all, men and women both. But tonight, since it's a men's group, our discussion will be focused on men, and that is managing our emotions. Now, John, I think when I think of men managing emotions, the first one I go to is anger. And that's unfortunate that when you consider men in general, the first one you go to is anger, not happiness or, there's a variety of emotions, right? Discouragement, depression, both good and bad, you could say, all have their dark side, all have the other side that can be good. Even anger, righteous anger. Christ had righteous anger, so not all emotions have only negative to them. But why is it, do you think, that men, if you were to ask to a survey, I think the answer would be, what first emotion do you consider when you consider men? You'd think anger. Why would that be?
Well, first of all, I think people would think men have emotions. Really? Okay, that's a new one. Because a lot of times men don't identify with the fact that we do have emotion. We look at our wives, and comparatively, we think we have nothing. Okay, especially if you have I guess most women are emotional, and that's great. That's something that God has made them. But we look at ourselves, and we compare ourselves with our wife and those around us, which is not wise. And we think, well, I don't think I have any emotion. I mean, especially not ones that are, going to be controlling me in a major way. But that's so wrong. According to the Bible, we all have emotion. When it comes to the emotion of anger, though, I think it's the one, well, first of all, I think you have to determine that anger is an emotion, because some people think anger is a sin, which can almost fly in the face of God's word, because God is angry, and God says to be angry and sin not, right? So be careful, we got to be careful not to take the actions that usually are portrayed in anger, which can be sin, and call anger sin. Anger is an emotion that God gave us. I think God gave us anger to have a proper emotion to deal with sin. We should be, in a way, angry at sin in ourselves, sin in, not so much those around us, but sin in the world, enough to actually motivate us to do something. However, the first thing that comes to mind usually in men when it comes to emotions is anger, because that's the only one we show predominantly.
Why is that the one that we show predominantly?
Because we want to be authoritative and we want to be heard. And it comes back to pride, because it's the way we show that we are in charge, and we are large and in charge. And so if something is not going right, we want to emotionally display that we are not happy with it. So anger is usually the emotion we choose.
So the emotions of happiness take away from the authority that we like to have, or it might steal some of that mystery that others might think of us when they see us happy and smiling. Ethan, what do you think? This idea that emotion of anger, in my opinion, and you may not agree, maybe you don't think anger is the emotion that would be surveyed closest to men, but what are your thoughts on the statement that I make, that anger seems to be quite often attached to men?
It's easy. I think it's the emotion. I agree. It's the emotion of choice when all you've done is it's fine, I'm fine. And when you're finally okay, now I have to, want me to express myself? All right, I'm about to express myself.
So if what John is saying is true, that men don't usually like to show emotion, then Ethan is concluding that anger is usually the emotion that will be shown when there is something evidence, because that's the one that blows up in your face, basically.
Right. It is the explosive emotion, yes. So, again, you put enough gas inside a container that doesn't have any way for the gas to escape, eventually it's going to, and if you don't, as a guy, you're always, part of the idea of being a man is taking on responsibility and taking on accountability, and that adds to a lot of pressure in your life.
I want to challenge that statement. You say as a man, responsibility and accountability. I would say men and women both. I would say a lot of men take on leadership positions in
True.
the home.
True.
I would say leadership is what is
Yes.
the responsibility, accountability. Not that
Yes.
women can't or don't as well, but within most conservative Christian homes,
Yes.
the men do take the leadership position. I believe, as God's word states, that we
Yes.
should.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's not so much the gender, but it's the leadership that comes with being a man,
Right.
a father, and a husband at
So
home.
I guess to clarify, that was a good clarification there. I guess to go a little deeper, like if you want to fulfill your God-given role, then you're going to assume pressure in your life.
Yes.
Just like
correct.
anybody else, mother, obviously, everyone has their own sort of pressure. If you're going to be a man of God, you're going to assume certain amounts of pressure in your life, and that does not take zero toll. Like you're going to feel it, and if you don't find a way to, whether it's talk to God or talk to a significant other or have a tribe of people that you do life with, then eventually all those emotions and the stuff that you're struggling with, the pressure just explodes. And I think, as someone who's been around, who has struggled with anger and who's like literally lived with people who have struggled with explosive anger, like that's the easiest. It's the explosive emotion.
Okay, we're going to be talking about anger, but I want to clarify this topic on men and managing our emotions is not purely about anger.
No,
Anger is
right.
one of many emotions that
very much
we
Yes.
experience. Anger might, I think, be the one that people see most often in our lives. It's not that we don't have the others. I think that a man, oftentimes, I think men who struggle with depression, discouragement, don't show it as much as they're willing to show anger. I think partly anger is more masculine,
Right.
part of the persona that we want other people to see, whereas depression, discouragement, not so much.
Weakness.
Not yet could be viewed as weakness. And I'm not saying that it is. I'm just saying I think a lot of men think that. It's not that men don't show depression, discouragement, not that men can't. I just think that generally anger is the emotion men are most safe in showing. They feel safe in showing it. They don't feel weak in showing it. And so they're more likely and they are more quickly to show anger than they would other emotions.
Yes, and once again, emotions are God-given. Anger is just one emotion that God has given. There are other emotions that God has given as well. God gave us what the Bible calls sometimes a soul, which is a lot of what our emotions and will pertains. And God gave us that part of us because if we're not careful, to be able to, I guess, identify with some of the characteristics He wants us to display to others, and even towards ourselves. Now, here's the problem. I think sometimes we demonize all these types of emotions that may be negative, because for the longest time in really the church world, these emotions were looked at as spiritual problems. And because of that, people would not go to church and really vent the fact that they have discouragement, because they get the answer of, well, I'm discouraged. Well, you're not praying enough.
Have you prayed, brother? Right.
Right.
It's literally, so you mentioned earlier, a lot of people think anger is a sin.
Right.
Anger is just an emotion. A lot of people think discouragement is a sin.
Right.
Discouragement, which can lead to depression, is still an emotion.
Right.
Depression is a much deeper felt
Right.
form of discouragement. It is still an emotion. Any of these emotions are, as John stated, part of the human condition. They themselves are not the sin. What you do in
Right.
depression can be a sin.
Correct.
What you do through anger can be the sin. By the way, what you do through happiness. Some people are so happy in a relationship, they make some really bad choices, some immoral, you might say, choices, because they're just so overwhelmed with euphoria and happiness. When they're with that person, they do some things that God's word would say are immoral, but they're just so happy they don't consider truth. They do it anyways. All emotions, every emotion can lead to bad choices, even the good ones,
Right.
like happiness.
Or the appropriate ones, like sadness.
Appropriate, I like that word, appropriate ones, you're right. And so none of these emotions of themselves are sin. And I'm glad all three of us are on the same page there. So why would we manage emotions if the emotions aren't sin? Why not just let them out? Because there are many therapists. I've read books. I've seen articles. I've read the news. A lot of therapists believe the healthiest thing to do is to display your emotions at all time. Never hold back. Whatever you feel, verbalize it, live it, show it.
Right.
So why are we stating today to manage something that many psychologists and therapists say don't manage? Just let it out.
I think Proverbs 25:28 gives us a little bit of a clue into what happens when we don't manage our,
Read that verse
our
for us,
soul
John.
or our spirit. The Bible says, "He that hath no rule over his own spirit is like a city that is broken down and without walls." So really, if you are the type of person that is going to display your emotions and leave them out on the table for everybody in every situation, you're really becoming defenseless to your harm. And you're setting yourself up to be criticized. You're setting yourself up to be, in a way, marginalized because of your emotions.
People are going to judge you, men especially,
Yes.
especially men in leadership positions. We have placed ourselves in a position to be judged. And I think men know that intrinsically. That is why we don't show emotions. We don't want to be judged or thrown under the bus. So I think most men already understand that first. Even
Yes.
not having read it, they know, look, if
Right.
I'm always showing my emotions, people are going to take advantage of me.
Right.
They are going to judge me. They are going to destroy me. They're going to use my emotions and somehow turn them back on me to get a step up in the corporate world or even in Christian circles.
Sure.
So that's a great verse, and I'm glad we started with that. That doesn't mean we never have emotions or show them.
course.
Read it again.
He that hath no rule over his own spirit.
So that doesn't mean emotionless.
It means you have to have them under control.
Under control, which is what we're talking about, managing emotions.
Right.
We're not saying eliminate emotions.
No.
We're not saying pretend we don't have emotions. We are saying be in control of your emotions, and when you do display them, you are displaying them for a purpose in the right environment to the right people.
Right.
Because the right environment to the wrong people, there's going to be some things said and done to you that will be hurtful. The right people in the wrong environment, there will be some confusion and a lot of awkwardness.
Right.
Right time, right people, that's when your emotions actually bring success to relationships. Ethan, thoughts before we actually get into some of these things that negatively affect our emotions?
No, I'm excited. We actually finished on Wednesday last week with youth group a series on emotions.
Oh, did you? So you're
Yeah.
primed and ready
Well,
to go, huh?
I'm excited because I'm just gonna steal notes and add it, so when I do that series again, I'll have more stuff to share.
Right. So let's start with what affects our emotions. Not positively, because things that positively affect our emotions, if we're going to discuss it later on, let's just get into the meat of the matter. Why do men let their emotions get to the point where it's beyond control? And then why do we not manage our emotions? Because pushing them down isn't managing them. Ignoring them is not managing them.
Correct.
So before we talk about how to manage them, let's talk about what causes them, what affects the emotions. And my first one here, I think, in my opinion, is one of the top for men. For the reason both of you guys mentioned, leaders, go-getters, we're out there doing the hard stuff. Not that women don't either, but again, this is a men's group, so we're gearing it towards men. Yeah. It is expected that men are hard workers by both men and women, right? That's just kind of comes with the territory. And men often are. And so inevitably, what happens when men are always going and going hard?
They get exhausted.
Exhaustion. Obviously, physical exhaustion is a big part of emotions getting messed up in our head. Not knowing where they're at, not feeling how we should feel. We go home, we know that we should feel happy to be home. All we are is frustrated when we walk in the door.
Right.
On the way home, in our heads, we play out, I'm going to hug my daughter, I'm going to play with my son. Within 3 minutes, you send all the kids to their rooms and say, don't bother me anymore. We'll see you at dinner, if that, or we'll send your dinner to your room. And how often does it not play out in reality that it did in your head? Like in your head, you're excited to be with your family, but as soon as you get there within moments, you snap emotionally. You contain it, but you contain it by sending everyone out of the room. Or you contain it by going out of the room yourself.
Right, and I think along with that illustration, some of the things that, I don't know if it's on the list, but unfulfilled expectations can be a major thing that triggers our emotion, right? And so you're expecting the kids to be totally controlled and ready to go and come up to you and with your slippers and your newspaper and say,
well, those days are gone. Those days are long gone.
Just because of newspaper. but I mean, the reality is sometimes that's part of it. But yes, physical exhaustion is a huge, and that's why Jesus many times told the disciples, come away, let's come away. Get away, let's go away. That word away was away from the grind of even his kingdom work.
You're right.
And he understood that.
I think there are a lot of men who, they don't really know why they keep going home and they're not happy being home. And they know that the chaos of work brings less exhaustion to them than the chaos of home. They also know that they can handle the emotional turmoil of the workplace better than they can handle it at home. I think a lot of men work long hours, not because they want more money. That's not really the real reason. I think it's really they're scared to go home. They want to have that home life. In their head, they dream about that home life. They don't know how to get it because every time they go home, their emotions take over, and it rarely ever works out like they want it to.
Right, and there's a reason that the secular world has happy hour.
You're right, John.
Because honestly,
right.
they go from work and they kind of get a tiny little, unfortunately, buzz, and then they're able to go into their night maybe a little bit less feeling the realities of what they're stepping into.
So again, this is a men's group, but we need to understand the consequences of this choice. For those with kids and a wife,
for sure.
You are placing on the wife a heavier burden, who also has had a long day. Even if she's a homemaker, she's been with kids all day. That itself brings exhaustion. And then when we stay at work longer for reasons that aren't really valid, but just because we don't want to go home, hoping the wife will put the kids to bed, we shouldn't be shocked when our wives hit their physical exhaustion breaking point. It's inevitable. We are causing it to happen.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we got to be protective of not just our physical exhaustion, but those that are around us. And that's part of being a good authority, is be careful, protecting people's exhaustion levels.
Emotions, unmanaged emotions, result in arguments, contention, fights. It results in broken relationships, hurt feelings. It results in confusion on the side of the children. Why is Dad coming home and yelling at me as soon as he walks in the door? Why does Dad seem frustrated with me because I'm literally, playing Xbox in the room? I'm not even bothering him, but the click of the controllers. My dad's going crazy because of this. It's confusing to the kids. It's discouraging to the wife. Everyone dislikes each other. Relationships are deteriorating fast. And if we were to really break it down, it is not due to a lack of love. The man loves his family. The man is a great caretaker. The kids love and want to be loved. Everyone's emotions are in chaos. And if the emotions could be controlled from the top down, the leadership down, that is the dad and the mom down, right? So many parents want their kids to be in control of their emotions, and yet the parents show very little control of their own.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So if the parents would just learn to manage their emotions, the home could achieve what is that fantasy in the car ride home of what they would like to see, if emotions could be managed. Yeah. But to manage emotions, the first step is managing our physical exhaustion.
Right.
That's hard to do. We often push ourselves to the limit and beyond. And when there's time to relax, we don't. We find something to do, especially as men. I think God just designed men. The core of how we operate is to accomplish things. I'm not saying there aren't lazy men out there. I think lazy men, in my opinion, are broken men. I don't think they're operating how God designed them to operate. Something's broken about them.
Right.
Something is broken within their spirit. Something is broken in their soul. Something has broken mentally, because when I see men in the Bible and how God designed men, and when I see Christ showing us what men look like, workers. Mm-hmm. They're workers. Right. So something is broken in a man who is just lazy, because the default mode for a man is a hard worker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's sometimes a virtue that becomes a vice. And we got to be careful about those, because when we allow something like hard work to become our worst enemy, then you can't stop working because you need to provide for yourself. So it's easy to kind of justify working harder and harder and harder and harder, because after all, I have to make a living. But I have often thought, you're making a living, but you're not living while you're doing it. And so
making a living but not making a life, huh?
Making a living but not making a life, right? And that's another thing that affects our families.
In the book of 1 Kings chapter 19, we're told of a man named Elijah, one of the most famous prophets of the Old Testament. I mean, right up there with Moses and Jeremiah and some of these other guys. This guy's the man. I'm looking forward to meeting Elijah. Not without his faults. Elijah was used by God to call out the blaspheming of hundreds of Baal, not worshipers, Baal priests. In fact, didn't just call them out, he ended up killing them.
Yes,
he himself, while the people, I envision in my head, so when you read chapter 18, it talks about how Elijah killed the priests. I can only envision in my head the Jews creating a circle where the priests could not escape. Because why would hundreds of priests wait for them to be stabbed by Elijah? They're trying to escape while being pushed back by the Jews, and Elijah is the one stabbing and slashing and killing hundreds. That alone is going to exhaust you. And then, after this story in chapter 18, we find another amazing event. Elijah prays for rain after it's been a drought season for years. Elijah prays for rain. The rain comes, and Elijah literally outruns the weather faster than the chariot. Another miracle. The first miracle was calling fire down from heaven on Mount Carmel. This is all in one chapter. Massive chapter of events. And so Elijah prays, fire down from heaven. The priests of Baal cannot. They lose their lives for it. And then Elijah prays for rain. The rain comes, and Elijah tells King Ahab, better get going. It's coming. Ahab hops in his chariot, starts riding back to town. Elijah has a foot race with the chariot and the horses, beats him, and then makes it back to town. He's exhausted, and then the moment Ahab gets back, he tells on Elijah to Jezebel, hey, Elijah just did all these things, killed your priests. And Jezebel says, we're going to find him, we're going to kill him.
Right.
Elijah's exhausted, does not have a time to rest because now his life is in danger. So now he has to escape the town, and he's searching for a place to hide, and he is so exhausted. We're told in chapter 19 that after he hears about Jezebel's threat, he goes in verse 4, a day's journey. He travels an entire day. After the events of chapter 18, there was no time for him to rest. When he finally finds this area under a juniper tree, he falls to the ground in exhaustion, and you can read the emotions. It doesn't say, and he was emotional. His statement says it all. What does he say?
I wish
I wish I was dead. I would have killed I'd be better off dead. He is not experiencing the emotion of anger. He's experiencing the emotion of depression.
Right.
In an extreme way. Not even discouragement, depression. He wants to die. This is the day after the major events of chapter 18. And now he wants to die. What happened? Physical exhaustion brought him to the brink of suicide. Mm-hmm. And this is a man of God like very few others in the Old Testament. This is a man that God used in unique ways that cannot be said even about some of the more famous prophets, you might say, or men like David weren't used in miraculous ways like Elijah. David never called fire down from heaven. David never outraced a chariot. Sure, the guy killed a giant. Got to give him that. But look, Elijah's life is full of amazing events like this. Mm-hmm. And this man of God, at the point of complete physical exhaustion, his emotions overwhelmed him, and he's ready to kill himself.
Right, and look at the series of events from another angle. Fire is called down from heaven. Rain starts happening, the first time in, 3 years, 18 months. He then goes to this place where he is going to shout words of victory, that there's about to be rain upon the earth, and then Jezebel wants to kill him. So it's almost like victory, 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 and one small, in a way, defeat of now I got to go on the run because Jezebel, this wicked woman, wants to kill me. It's almost like, in a way, he's frustrated that God can allow me to do all these things, but I'm still subservient to the wickedness that is around me.
I agree with you, but consider, this is not the first time Elijah's life has been at stake. Remember, when he was hiding from the drought, they were looking for him to kill him.
Yes, they were.
And this is not the last time. Later, Elijah's life will be threatened, and Elijah handles it pretty beastly. Like, the guy takes it. I agree with you, John. Like, this victories and then the defeat. But why was Elijah responding to it in such an extreme emotional way?
Oh, he was exhausted.
That's what I think is going on. I think the physical exhaustion is showing us a side of Elijah you don't really see ever again before or after this event.
I think just to kind of piggyback off John saying, there's like two other, like, in addition to exhaustion, there's also really two other really good examples. So he's experiencing a lot of highs here, a lot of emotional highs, and obviously a huge emotional low. But either way you pin it, like when you're going through life, if you have a lot of emotional highs in life, that's always a very good thing to be able to, like, to step back and make sure that, like,
you get some rest.
Right, like, okay, or at least be able, like, to do that, to step back and survey. All right, this is really good, but just remember, this is a mountaintop experience. All right, let's get back to work.
No, I agree, but
enjoy
again,
it.
how many mountaintop experiences did Elijah have?
Right, no, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So add that to the the physical exhaustion, and then something else too. These are very savage times. I've talked about this all the time with middle schoolers. Like, today in warfare, well, now you can just press a button. But, even on the street, if you're 50, 100 yards away from somebody, it's one thing to kill them from that distance. It's another thing, like, I'm looking in your eyes as I
as
say
you-
goodbye.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah, true.
and again, like that's also a very like when you that's the idea of doing very hard things, doing something that's very raw, very difficult, which a lot of that many times that's what life feels like. You're doing lots of things that are like, wow, if only somebody knew what I had to just do to go through in order to get this thing done. And again, it doesn't take anything with physical exhaustion, but it's just the idea of like, look, these are all things that as guys we have to take stake of or keep track of as we're.
Well, let me clarify. I'm not saying physical exhaustion alone will bring you to the point of suicide.
Right.
I'm saying physical exhaustion essentially wears your emotions to nothing, and then things that you normally would be able to handle.
Yeah.
Because Elijah has handled death threats
Yes.
before and
Right.
will handle them again.
Right. Yes.
Without saying I want to die. So I'm not saying that the other issues aren't issues. You're right. Emotional highs, spiritual highs definitely result in coming down the other side. But Elijah has been and will be dealing with those emotional highs and handles them pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Death threats, Elijah handles well. Why can he not respond to them well here? I think the issue here is the physical exhaustion brought him to that point where he could not respond as he normally would
Because this is not something that he's never faced before.
or will face again.
Right.
Right, and this is something that kicks him on a spiral down because he does get some rest under that juniper tree, and God
Yes,
sends
he
an
does.
angel to minister unto him and to give him sustenance. He's still not right, though. And we know that because even after the angel visits, even after that rest, he gets up and goes 3 days to a place that God has never commanded him to go.
It's 40 days.
40 days.
Yeah, a lot longer.
40 days
Yeah,
to a place.
40 days.
But it
Travels
was
to
a
Mount Horeb.
3 days journey, right? For 40 days, he was
It
there.
says he says he arose, did eat and drink, and went in the strength of that meat 40 days
Oh,
and 40
yeah,
nights
gotcha.
unto Horeb, the Mount of God.
Right. So I don't know if it was that far away, 40 days. I think he was there for 40 days and 40 nights under the strength of that.
Could be.
meat. But I don't, because geographically it's not that far.
He might have
Horeb
taken
is-
a detour. Yeah, I know, I agree. I understand.
So 40 days would be, somewhere in the middle
Maybe
of Iran.
maybe he was. I mean, I don't know, running that far, that fast. That's a leg
He
day.
did really
Yeah,
slow
that's
down.
true.
You have
Yeah,
to-
I think about it.
The point is,
Big leg day.
when Elijah hit that physical exhaustion, what did God do for him?
He fed him.
Force him to rest.
Fed him and forced him to rest.
Yep.
Not once, twice.
Yeah.
The angel wakes him up, feeds him, and then lets him sleep again. Then wakes him up, feeds him, and after resting twice,
Right.
then God says, now let's deal with the other issue, and that was his loneliness. That was his need for encouragement, and that's when he's going to give him Elisha. But the exhaustion part, do you think Elijah could have responded to the Mount Horeb situation well in his previous condition?
No, not at all. He
All
would
right.
felt isolated.
The Mount Horeb condition, the Mount Horeb scenario alone is going to be really intense.
Right.
Yep.
But Elijah is better able to respond in the right way at that time when God basically says, shut up and listen to me, Elijah.
Right.
Pay attention to the still small voice.
Right.
Elijah's able to do that because he had rest.
Yep.
Men, I am not saying don't be the caretaker. I'm not saying don't do the hard things. People need men who can do hard things. But you cannot go indefinitely. There has to be moments of rest. From the beginning of time, God established a moment of rest.
Yep.
Every week, the Sabbath day. This is not a law to which we are bound as New Testament believers, but it is a principle that was established before the law that we would be wise to follow. I've known men who say, my Sabbath is not Saturday, it's a different day. I think a lot of Christians, the Sabbath is now Sunday. For pastors, it's a little hard to have a Sabbath as a Sunday, and honestly, for me, my Sabbath is broken up between multiple days. I don't really have one day. Just my schedule does not allow it. But I do take opportunities throughout multiple days that would culminate in the amount of rest that I need so I can do what I need to do. And I've noticed that when I don't do the weeks I can't or don't do that, the things that I can normally handle well seem to break down real fast for me. John, any thoughts?
No, I think you very well said it. When we don't take the rest we need, we often are a lesser, I guess you could say, version of ourselves in many ways. And so, yeah, we're able to keep on going like the Energizer Bunny, but just like that battery, as it continues to wear, then the tune on that whatever starts to really slow down. And yeah, you can recognize it, but it's not the same as when it's fully charged. And so that's something that's, likened to man's overall exhaustion level. When we're fully exhausted, we cannot do the things that we usually could do well. And that's one of those things where we open ourselves up to criticism. And we're not taking rule over our own spirit. And so we're like a city broken down without walls if we're not taking the rest we need.
Ethan, any final thoughts?
No, I think you said everything really well. Just there's nothing wrong with trying to see how much your tank can hold. There's nothing wrong with doing that to a certain degree. But also, at some point, you have to rest. And Sabbath is something you have to honor. You don't, it's not necessarily possible for everybody to have a day to, quote unquote, a whole day to themselves, even on a monthly level, on a monthly basis. But you should be finding opportunities to rest because, if your family if you have a family, they need you to be rested.
By the way, we're not talking about when you lay your head down on your pillow at night.
Right.
Because that's established every night. The Sabbath day was not a sleep all day.
No.
Right.
Resting while awake is not the same as resting while asleep. Obviously, you need a certain amount of hours sleep every night. That's not even what we're talking about now. Hopefully you understand that. We are discussing the need for men to rest in the day, doing things you enjoy that are not heavy, burdensome, stressful, but instead bring pure joy and relaxation.
Yeah. Not
during
working.
the day
Mhm.
and not work.
Yep.
Because work even can be enjoyable, but still brings that exhaustion.
Still work. Work is always work.
Something non-work.
Yep.
Men, we aren't good at that. And because we aren't good at that, we're not good at managing our emotions. The one, and I got a list right here, John. I sent it to you guys.
Yep.
Got a list of things that affect us negatively. This is the first one, and we do very poorly at this one. We need to rest during the day on top of getting enough rest at night. And once a month, as Ethan mentioned, isn't enough. God established the Sabbath weekly. That is the pattern he designed for the human condition. By the way, that was before the fall.
Yes.
How much
not
worse
his
is it
fault.
after the fall, John?
Right.
In his perfection,
Right.
Adam was still expected to rest.
Right.
We are far from perfect now. Our bodies aren't close to what Adam's would have been in perfection, and God established that before the fall.
So get that rest when, and not when you need it, because that's very deceptive.
You're past that point.
Yeah. You're way past where you probably should be when you absolutely need it, when you're
Right.
about to just fall over exhausted. And that's a point you just can't get to.
Now, physical exhaustion can be the result of other things, dietary choices, medications that you take that mess with your body, food that you do and do not eat, the amount of water you put in. We're not doctors. We're not going to go down that road, just mentioning it so that you consider these things. And if you say, guys, like I do take times of rest, my body's still exhausted. Look, check out your thyroid condition, right? Check out your hyperthyroid, hypothyroid. Check out medications you're taking that they're just causing you physical exhaustion. If you're going the medical route, then seek medical help.
Right.
But understand there are a lot of things that affect our physical exhaustion above and beyond just working.
Yeah, just on that note, a lot of high performing people, they manage their health, their sleep. They manage their rest because they know that, if their company or their organization needs them to be at the best, then they have to make sure that, their diets supporting that their sleep habits and their workout habits are all supporting that.
So men, thank you, Ethan. Ethan's going to shut down the tonight's event as we talk to the men here shortly. But men, I'm going to leave you with this. Your body is not perfect. How you treat it will definitely result in how you feel. Treat your body well. It needs rest. You can't go all the time. Consider the medical. Consider the choices that you can do at home, and consider the choices you need to bring someone in, a professional, to balance out the chemical balance and the other things that are going on in your life so that you can be at your best place and be the father and the husband and the friend that the people you love deserve. Thank you for joining us tonight. We will not have a men's group next Sunday due to Mother's Day.
Yes.
And to celebrate mothers next Sunday, and we'll
Amen.
get back together again the following Sunday, continuing this conversation on managing our emotions.